Hey everyone, and welcome. So today, we're diving into a really fascinating language learning method called Total Physical Response, or TPR for short. It's an approach that literally gets you out of your chair and learning with your entire body. So how on earth does it work, and could it be the key to unlocking your language potential? Let's find out.
You know the feeling, right? We've all been there. You've studied the words, you think you know the grammar, but the second you try to speak, your mind just goes completely blank. That feeling, that anxiety, it's this huge roadblock for so many language learners, and it's the exact problem TPR was designed to solve.
So to really understand how TPR gets around this brain freeze, we need to go back to the guy who came up with it, a psychologist named James Asher. He took a hard look at traditional language classes and saw a really fundamental problem. They often create a ton of stress, which can actually stop us from learning effectively. And here's the crucial part. Asher didn't just see anxiety as some unfortunate side effect of learning. No, he saw it as the main reason so many of us struggle or even fail. So his entire method was built from the ground up to just get rid of that pressure and make learning feel natural and fun again.
Asher's solution was, well, brilliantly simple. He just asked, what if we could learn a second language the exact same way we all learned our first one? Think about it. As little kids, we weren't sitting there with textbooks and grammar drills. We just listened, we watched, we moved, and eventually, we understood.
So Asher's whole method is really built on three core ideas. First off, comprehension comes way before speaking. A little kid understands pick up the toy long before they can actually say that sentence themselves. Second, he believed learning is deeply tied to physical action, which lights up the right side of our brain and helps lock in memory. And third, and this one might be the most important, learning just works better in a low-stress environment where nobody's forcing you to speak before you're ready.
So what does this actually look like in a real classroom? Honestly, the best way to picture it is to think of a big game of Simon Says. That's really the vibe. It's active, it's engaging, and it's all about listening and doing. So let me walk you through how a typical lesson actually unfolds.
Okay, so a lesson usually flows through these three stages. First, you've got the modeling phase. This is where the teacher says something like, point to the door, and then actually points to the door right along with the students. Simple enough. Next up is the performance phase. Now the teacher gives the command, but this time only the students do the action. And finally, you get to the really fun part, novel commands. This is the real test of understanding.
This is where you might get a command like, jump to the desk. Now, it might sound a little silly, but it's a brilliant way to check if a student truly understands the individual words jump and desk, not just some phrase they memorized. It's all about flexible comprehension, not just mimicry. You're not memorizing rules. You're just absorbing the language naturally through experience. It's what's called inductive learning.
Okay, so we can see how this might work in a classroom, but why does it work? What's going on in our brains? Let's get into the cognitive science behind TPR and the real power of linking words to physical movement.
So Asher's theory really comes down to this idea of brain lateralization, how the two halves of our brain work. He argued that traditional language study is super left brain dominant. It's all about abstract rules, grammar, verbal logic. TPR, on the other hand, is designed to fire up the right brain by connecting language directly to motor skills and physical actions. He believed that physically embodying the language leads to much stronger and longer-lasting memory.
And this leads us to a really key concept in language learning called the affective filter. You can think of it like an emotional wall. When we're stressed out, anxious, or afraid of making a mistake, that wall goes way up, and it literally blocks new information from getting in. TPR's main goal is to lower that filter. By taking away the pressure to speak right away, it just makes the brain way more open and ready to learn.
Okay, so let's break down the actual dynamics here. In a TPR classroom, who does what? What are the rules of the game? And, super important, how are mistakes handled?
Well, right from the start, the roles are crystal clear. The teacher is basically the director. They plan the whole lesson, they choose the words, and they model every single action. The students, they're the listeners and performers. Your only job is to listen, watch, and follow the commands. See? The burden of having to come up with words yourself is just gone.
So how long does this silent, active listening phase actually last? Well, according to the method, after about 10 to 20 hours of instruction, students just naturally start to feel ready and confident enough to begin speaking. The key is, they're never forced. The desire to speak just kind of bubbles up on its own.
And that readiness leads to this really cool stage called role reversal. This is the moment when a student feels confident enough to flip the script and start giving commands to the teacher or to their classmates. It's a totally natural, student-led switch from just understanding the language to actually producing it.
And what if a student makes a mistake? Well, in TPR, errors are totally expected and treated with a lot of tolerance. Any correction is really gentle and low-key, kind of like how a parent might patiently correct a small child. The number one priority is always to keep that affective filter, that wall of anxiety, as low as humanly possible.
So, as we start to wrap this up, let's just boil the whole philosophy of total physical response down to its most essential parts. What's the big idea here?
So what are the really big takeaways? First, meaning comes from physical action, not from translating words in your head. Second, the simple command is the powerful engine that drives the whole method. Third, grammar isn't a list of rules you have to memorize, it's a pattern you just absorb through experience. And finally, TPR totally redefines the classroom as a place for getting up and moving, not just for sitting and thinking.
And all of this leads us with a really critical question. We know TPR is amazing for building a stress-free foundation, but is it the complete path to fluency? I mean, how do you use physical commands to teach abstract ideas like democracy or disappointment? It really suggests that while TPR might be the perfect launchpad for starting a new language, true mastery probably means blending its principles with other methods, especially when you need to tackle the more complex, abstract parts of advanced communication.